Hi and welcome to this monitor calibration tutorial from EIZO. In this tutorial we're going to show you how to calibrate the CG247X with ColourSpace from Light Illusion. So ColourSpace comes in a variety of different versions. The entry-level version that will allow you to talk directly to the EIZO monitors is the LTE version, and then there's the Cal version. So these versions allow you to use the internal probe, the internal test pattern generators, as well as being able to upload directly into the EIZO monitor. The LTE and the Cal versions allow you to use, apart from the internal probe, the i1 Display Pro as well. If you have reference probes like the CR100 or the Klein K10 or the Minolta type probes, then you need to use the more professional versions of ColourSpace. So ColourSpace allows you to profile, to create the 3D LUT, to do the scaling that's required, and then to upload that LUT directly into the monitor. So it's quite a straightforward process using ColourSpace. So after the calibration, you'll be able to have a monitor that's suitable for the most critical color grading work. So to calibrate the CG247X with ColourSpace, we simply open that up and we get the main screen up here. The left-hand side, we get the management icon, the profiling and display characterization, the LUT tools and the reporting. So we just simply click on the profiling tab and up comes the profiling window. On the left hand side we have all our different graphs, and up the top here we have our different tabs we select to go and set up for the calibration. So the first thing we do is set our target, what we're aiming for, which is in this case Rec 709. Down here we have our target luma, so that just really is used for calculating the delta E errors. On the right hand side you can choose the patch window. We're going to be using a full patch window. Here we have the patch scale legal resolution. Now we're going to be using the internal patch generator in the EIZO monitor, and for that we need to make sure that that matches the incoming signal level that we would normally expect, which in this case is legal if we're running in a video world from DaVinci Resolve, or if you're running Avid or that sort of program. Generally we're always working in legal range. So to use the internal test pattern generator within the EIZO monitor, we need to set that for legal. If you're using Resolve as your test pattern generator, then you would set that to full. And the reason being is that Resolve, it is set in its settings to video levels, so the scaling and the control of that is done by Resolve itself. But because we're going to be using the internal test pattern generator within the EIZO, we need to put that to legal to match the video signal range that we're going to be working in. So we don't need any pre-roll. And the active LUT, we can simply load, once we've created the LUT, we can actually load that LUT in there to test that LUT through ColourSpace itself. On the second tab we're going to be using the i1 Display Pro, and we just simply connect to that. There is the EIZO internal probe, which is useful for calibrating the monitor, especially with the Color Navigator 7. But when you are using the CG247 with a 16:9 raster, the internal probe is just sitting only slightly above the actual raster itself, which can cause a little bit of inaccuracies. It's fine when you've got a full raster, it's very, very good. And when you're using Color Navigator 7, it's extremely good. But if you've got a 16:9 raster, I suggest you would be using an external probe in this case. And the i1 Pro is the most common one. You've obviously got a lot more from CR100s and that sort of thing in the upper end, the Klein K10s. The calibration settings, the type of display, so we need to go and tell the probe what sort of display we have, and we've got an RG phosphor. In this case, you can leave the integration time 0.75. I would add a little bit of extra delay, talking back and forth the monitor, so the monitor should be connected to your computer via the A to B USB cable. In the second tab, we select EIZO. There's a whole series of test patterns you can choose. If you want to use Resolve, you'd use the network server. and those instructions can be found on the Light Illusion website. We're going to be using the EIZO internal test pattern generator for those of you who don't necessarily have Resolve, and you simply hit connect. So ColourSpace talks directly to the CG247, which allows you to control the internal test pattern generators. Also allows the ability to upload the LUT directly as well. So you can actually control the brightness as well of the monitor from the ColourSpace settings. Importantly, there's two test pattern generators. There's what's called the standard and the emulated. The standard is after all the LUTs, so you can't use the standard to verify the calibration. To verify a calibration and the 3D LUT, you need to use the emulated because that's injected before the LUT, so therefore it goes through the LUT processing. So we're going to be using the emulated, which is why in the emulated, we need to go and set the patch scale to legal. If you were using the standard patch generator, which is after the scaling within the monitor, if you're using standard, then you would set this patch scale to full, but then you wouldn't be able to verify through the LUT. So we're going to go and use the emulated test pattern generator, and then we just simply hit the automatic selection here for the calibration patches. And now ColourSpace will talk to the CG247, and it's now got the test pattern generator internally under control. What we also need to do is need to make sure that there's no other LUTs or processing within the slot, and you should have checked that you're actually on the Cal slot and not another slot, because you can overwrite the other slots. You only have one 3D LUT available, so it's best to use the presets where they are as presets and calibrate the Cal slot to the desired calibration. So we just simply select the Unity bypass, and this will now upload a null LUT into the CG247X to make sure it's all clear and ready for profiling. So you can see it's very, very quick. In the next tab we have our graphs, which we'll be looking at later, so you can look at various functionalities within the graphs, different errors and what have you. And then we have the manual measure. I like to use the manual measure just to check that everything is going okay. So you'll notice that only goes to 940 because we're on legal levels, and you can just simply measure that and make sure everything is measuring and going as you would want. So you'll notice this is at 110 because our native panel is a little bit in towards the blue, which is very, very common, and that'll be corrected within the LUT. And once we do that, that luminance level will go down towards the 100 nit, and then we can fine tune that if we need to using the interactive controls. So because the EIZO monitors are very, very linear, it allows us to use some smaller profiles to create very accurate calibrations. And a new function within ColourSpace is a multi-primary colour engine. And to do that, we can use what's called the grayscale plus large. So this just runs a large grayscale, the red, green, blue primaries, and the cyan, yellow, and magenta secondaries to create a profile that we then go and use to create the LUT for the 3D. So there's only 39 patches, so it's fairly quick. So we just simply hit the start, and if you've got anything in there previously, it'll ask you to clear it because we did a measurement. And that'll now go and run a grayscale and then go and measure the primary and secondary colours. And so it doesn't take too long. I also like to go and select that and keep an eye on it. So the delta error is going to be quite high because the native panel is using a 2.2 gamma and is looking for Rec 709 as a 2.4. But really what we're just looking to see is making sure that everything's actually measuring okay here. I'm not worried about any errors at this particular point in time. This is all in real time, so we're going through the red and the green, blue, and our cyan, then magenta and yellow. And you can see down here that we're just about finished. So that took just 1 minute 26 seconds to create that profile. We click OK. So what we need to do now is actually save the profile. So we go up into our graph options and we hit save and we give it a name. Spell. So whatever name you like to do, just so long as you can remember it. So once you've done that, you just click OK. So our next item we need to do is to go into the LUT tools, and we just click the LUT tools, and once we've done that, the LUT tools will open up. So we go to this first button here and we say generate LUT, and we have our source. So the source is basically the standard we're trying to calibrate to, and the destination is our profile that we've just created. So we go and find our profile, there it is there, ColourSpace Rec 709, and we give it a name, and we can call it Rec 709 is good. And that Rec 709 will actually appear as a slot name when you go into the mode of the monitor. So we're going to use peak chroma because we've got a very wide gamut, very linear monitor, and we just click the create button. And that'll take a couple of minutes usually to create a LUT for you. So that just took a couple of minutes to do that, and you can see it gets report, and you'll see that what we're looking for is a really nice, clean, smooth image. You can see how the outer of the cube is the native gamut, and now it's reduced that down into there to make Rec 709, and we look at our 1D to see how that is. Now with the 247 there's another step you need to do which is critical. If you're feeding legal levels coming from Resolve, which is very normal, if you're coming from an Avid or Premiere Pro, they will nearly 100% of the time be using legal or limited levels to display an image on the screen. So to do that, this is the full range LUT. So what we need to do is scale it. So we click on this end button here called Adjust, go to Video Scale, Past Black, which puts just interpolated values. And if you look at this bottom end here, at the start of the 1D curve, you'll see that that gets lifted up. So what's happening? You've got interpolated values here, and the real data starts at code value 16, for instance. So that's now a scaled LUT, which is what we need to do for the CG247 when we're running video signals. So what we simply do now is go into the Manage LUT, and we save that LUT. So that LUT now, Rec 709, is saved into the system. So to load that into the monitor, we simply go back to our Profiling tab, up to the Hardware. So to upload that LUT, we need to just simply go into the Select LUT and find that LUT here, Rec 709, and click the Upload button. Okay, so that's just about done. It's loaded into the LUT. So what we can do now is we just go into the manual measure, just check our peak white and have a look where that peak white is sitting. Seeing the LUT was changed, so you can see now that's extremely good. Like that's fantastic result. So we've got 100.628, which we're happy with. So what we do now is we'll simply just go into our auto update. So we update that, and that'll look at the black and the peak white. Set that for us, showing through black. So when we look at our delta E errors, we can check where things are at. Okay, so that's set. So what we can do now is we can have a look at a grayscale, make sure that the grayscale is all okay. So we just simply hit the Start button. And I like to go and look at the manual measure as well at the same time, gives us a good indication. So you can see here 0.4, delta E, so it's extremely good. 1.5. Well, this will just do a simple grayscale of a 10-step. And this is just simply to do a quick verification before we do a larger verification to make sure everything's okay. Okay, so we can just check that out, make sure it's all good. Nice and lovely, our RGB balance, our delta E grayscale. Now there is one aspect that needs to be taken into consideration with the CG247X when you're using a 3D LUT, and that is you need to ensure that the signal into the CG247 is an RGB signal and not a component signal. And the reason being is because the LUT is at the head of the pipeline and before the component to RGB conversion and scaling. So if you're in Resolve, you can simply go and select RGB by going down to the cogwheel icon and selecting this Use 444 SDI. So if you find you've got funny looking green and magenta colours, that's usually an indication with the 3D LUT that you're sending the 3D LUT or the signal into the monitor as a component signal and not as a RGB signal. So you must use an RGB signal when using a 3D LUT for calibration with the CG247. So once we've done that, what we can do now, I like to do, is to go and have a look at the entire colour volume. And so to do that, we can go and just use a cube and use a 10-point cube. I find that's a good size to give us a really good view of the entire colour volume. So I normally go into the CIE, we go and hit the start button. We'll say you've got that there, so yes, we'll overwrite that. And then we can go and have a look at our whole colour volume with a 1000 patch run and just check out where things are at within that. So that'll take about 16 or 20 minutes with the i1D3, and we'll come back and have a look. So we're coming down to the end of the 1000 patch verification. See on the bottom line around here. Okay. So it took 35 minutes, a bit longer. And what we can have a look at now, you can see here on this CIE chart, all these green dots are basically delta errors less than 1, totally imperceptible. It's quite common to get some errors right and black on an LCD monitor, but if we look at the actual overall colour volume, we can see throughout the entire range, these little coloured dots here are simply the primaries and secondaries, but all through the entire colour volume we've got delta E errors less than 1, with a profile only consisting of a large grayscale, primary and secondaries to create the 3D LUT. So you get exceptional results because the EIZO monitors are so linear. So we have a look at the gamma. We only get a few points within the 1000 patch to do that. You can do a large grayscale to check that as well. And the RGB balance is excellent. And of course, the delta E errors are down here well below even 0.5. So extremely good results calibrating the CG247X with ColourSpace. You just must remember that you have to match the range settings within the signal formats to have everything work correctly. That means setting the signal to legal range normally, having the LUT scaled for legal range, and then using an RGB signal into the CG247X if you're using a 3D LUT. Thank you for watching.